Hi, welcome sa ating diagnostic test answer processing or diagnostic test deliberation. Essentially, diagnostic tests are designed for us to measure your competencies in 5 curricular areas. The diagnostic test is composed of 150 items, 30 items per curricular area. And I will be discussing to you the essentials on your answers, and we have to further discuss the options, and we will I will also try to introduce techniques and how did I analyze the answer. Okay, let's start. For the number one question, which of the following systems in the body is responsible for production of hormones that control metabolism and growth? If we can observe, this question is a bit odd and out of place because you tend to question the question, why is it necessary for social worker to know these things? But then again, if we have to look back into the human behavior and social environment, we have to treat our client as a biopsychosocial and spiritual being. That means to say, this is the biological component in understanding human behavior because changes in hormones, changes in chemicals in our body affects our human behavior. And this question is also related to social work. All right? So your answer in this question should be letter D, or endocrine system. Because endocrine system produces hormones and chemical substances that regulates body growth and metabolism. For example, the love hormone or oxytocin, no? Or the happy hormone, it releases from our endocrine system, it releases this chemical substance that affects our mood. Okay. Okay, that's the answer. And A, the digestive system is not the answer because it is responsible for translating the food into energy. Nervous system naman is for our the control of the body and communication among its part. And the lymphatic system naman, it is responsible for the transfer of white blood cells in the bone marrow. Okay, yun yung yun yung bakit hindi sila yung answer. Okay? Number two, Number two question. A client sees a woman get brutally beaten and killed during an incident of domestic violence. Shortly after the incident, the client reports the inability to see. This client is most likely expressing the defense mechanism of. So, babalikan natin, saan ba ito nanggaling na konsepto? Of course, galing yan kang Freud. Now, Freud discusses different defense mechanisms that we use in order to get away, in order to compensate, in order to deal with an anxiety-provoking situation. This question, your answer should be letter A, conversion, because conversion in its simplest form, those anxiety-provoking situations are turned into a physical complaint. Okay, yun, nag-complain siya na hindi na siya nakakakita. But then again, this is a defense mechanism that our client use or that person uses if meron yung mga situation na ganito. Okay? Letter B naman, acting out, basically by its simplest form, it is a defense mechanism that we perform in such a way that we express ourselves in an extreme behavior. In compensation, on the other hand, letter C, of we tend to, this defense mechanism is we use when we tend to overachieve in one area to compensate for failures of in another. Okay. Reaction formation, on the other hand, letter D, it is not the answer because reaction formation is a form of fixation in a conscious idea, feeling or desire that the opposite to be feared or conscious impulses. For example, yun yung tinatawag natin na isang manifestation yan yung Stockholm syndrome, no? So, yung sino yung kinakatakutan natin, I mean sa sino yung mas kinatatakutan natin na tao or that triggers our anxiety, we tend to form a feeling of affection, we turn to feeling of, we submit to them because we, to avoid that anxiety provoking situation. Okay, so the correct answer of number two question is letter A, conversion. Number three question, a woman has strong feelings of resentment towards her sister. These feelings are rooted in her childhood and she has always believed that her sister was a mean person. However, throughout her childhood, she reports being inseparable from her sister and doing everything together. She also reported buying necklace for her recently that states best sister ever. Now this defense mechanism, this is what we call splitting. Okay, we use splitting if merong two contradictory feelings or thoughts about a certain person or situation. In the type of question, we have to look at the quotes. Kapag may mga quote in quote yan, that means to say that that question is intended for you to highlight those quotable words or terms. Now, this is splitting because two contradictory feelings exist at the same time. So you cannot separate it. Okay, that is what we call splitting. Substitution, hindi siya pwedeng substitution because in its simple definition, substitution refers to the adjustment from an original goal to from an original difficult goals to into a more realistic one. Kasi kapag hindi mo na-achieve or if an individual did not achieve that idealistic goal, then it becomes an anxiety-provoking situation. That is what we call substitution. Projective identification, on the other hand, hindi siya pwedeng maging answer dito because it is something attributing your unacceptable feelings or thoughts of ourselves to someone else, and that person internalizes the projective qualities. So, in other words, kung ano yung hindi natin matanggap-tanggap sa ating sarili, we project it onto somebody else, and that projection, and that person internalizes na siya na mismo ang mali, siya mismo ang may mali. Yun yung projective identification. Reaction formation, on the other hand, yun yung na-discuss natin kanina na you tend to have this opposing feeling against that person. For example, you hate, you despise or you hate, you have this feeling of hatred against your boss. Hindi mo siya ma-feel na hindi mo siya verbally masasabi na you hate that person, but actually pinapakita mo siya in a way na sumusunod ka sa kanya, pinapakita mo na importante siya. Yun yung reactive formation, kabaliktaran ng feeling, yung true feeling mo. So yun yung answer, no? The splitting is the answer in number 3. For question, husband complains that his wife nags him too much about working around the house. Once she stops this behavior, he begins to spend more time on house maintenance. Ano bang concept na ito? This is coming from the behavioral theories, no? Shaping, negative reinforcement, aversion treatment, and positive reinforcement. Ang tinutukoy dito na behavioral sa response is yun yung the husband spends more time on house maintenance. But the question is, what kind of concept or what is the concept behind this phenomenon? Now, reinforcement is a form of stimulus that is introduced to strengthen a behavior. For example, if your child, he or she excels in her exam and you want to maintain that behavior or that performance, so you introduce reinforcement, some kind of reinforcement to strengthen or to sustain that behavior. Punishment, on the other hand, is an aversive stimulus. No? For example, nabagsak or palaging late, pinagalitan mo or pinalo mo, that is some kind of punishment para ma-change yung kanyang behavior. But wala namang punishment dito, no? Walang punishment na choice. The correct answer should be letter B, negative reinforcement. It is somehow kind of reinforcement kasi walang punishment na nangyari. But then again, kinuha lang yung existing na aversive stimulus, which is nagging. So kapag kinuha yung nagging, nasa-strengthen naman yung or na-maintain naman yung behavior ni husband to spend more time in house maintenance. So the correct answer is negative reinforcement. May pinagkaiba kasi yung negative reinforcement at punishment. Negative reinforcement, existing na yung aversive stimulus, kinuha mo lang to strengthen the behavior. Ang punishment is an aversive stimulus itself na introduce mo para ma-stop yung behavior. Okay? So shaping, it is not the answer because shaping is a form of experimental analysis of behavior. Experimental analysis, wala namang experimental analysis dito because the question is simply stating the situation. Aversive treatment is a form of therapy whereby this unwanted behavior, for example, smoking, is paired with discomfort. For example, kapag ang isang client na nag-undergoing ng therapy na ito, kasi aversion treatment is a form of therapy, yung kapag nagki-crave siya ng smoking, i-introduce ni therapist ngayon na magkaroon siya ng elastic band na pwede nang pitikin yung sarili niya kapag nafi-feel niya yung yung urge to smoke. So pwede yan, aversion treatment na discourage yung smoking through pairing that craving with discomfort na pipitikin niya yung sarili niya. Okay? Positive reinforcement naman, yun yung kapag yung bata magaling sa klase, binibigyan siya ng candy or binibigyan siya ng pera. That is to sustain or to maintain that behavior. Okay? So your answer should be letter B, negative reinforcement. Number 5, a client who struggles with alcoholism is prescribed with medication that makes him feel sick every time he drinks while taking it. The use of this medication is what type of operant technique? Ito na yung answer. Ito yung aversion therapy. Yung alcoholism as a negative or unwanted behavior, you pair it with the discomfort. Ang discomfort dito is yung medication that makes you feel sick every time you drink alcohol. That is aversion therapy. Okay. Letter C ang answer. Extinction, ito yung concept, no? Concept ng behavioral theories na it is somehow fading of non-reinforced condition stimulus. For example, ang aso, kapag tinuruan mo siyang or kung ang bata, tinuruan mo siyang magsulat, no? Tapos, na-achieve niya yung behavior na yon. Tapos, na-stop mo yung reward, no? Hindi mo na siya nabigyan ng reward to sustain that behavior. So it leads to extinction, no? Namamatay yung behavior na yon kapag hindi na introduce ng reinforcement or ng punishment. Flooding, on the other hand, is an exposure therapy. Ginagamit ang flooding sa mga phobias, no? For example, kapag may phobia ka sa mga spider, ikukulong ka sa isang room na full of plastic spider na hindi naman totoo, and later on you will realize na hindi pala ganun ka, kinikreate mo pala yung sa sarili mo yung phobia na yon. That is flooding you. That is a form of therapy. In vivo desensitization naman is a form of exposure therapy pa rin against para sa phobia. But then again, itong in vivo desensitization, unlike flooding, step by step, no? From a simple to complex na form of therapy. For example, if you have fear of spider, i-introduce ng therapist sa'yo from first pinapakita ka muna ng picture ng mga spiders, then later on may plastic spider na i-introduce sa'yo from afar, tapos next session na naman palapit ng palapit, and later on flooding na. So yun in vivo desensitization and flooding. But the correct answer is aversion therapy. Okay, madidiscuss niyo yung mga concept nito doon sa human behavior and social environment na discussions. Okay, number 6, which of the following is not a physical symptom of trauma? Itong question na ito, medyo tricky na ito kasi kapag hindi mo alam what is the nature and characteristic of trauma, hindi mo alam yung sagot. But then again, by looking at the question, ang tanong kasi is a physical symptom. So, which is not a physical symptom. So, lahat ng ito ay physical symptom, basically. So, alin lang dito ang hindi physical symptom, the correct answer is letter B, feeling disconnected, because that is a social, no? Hindi siya physical. That is a social symptom. You tend not to socialize with others because you experience you experience trauma. So, insomnia, muscle tension, and aches and pains, that is a physical symptom, but feeling disconnected is a social symptom of trauma. Number 7 question. A client has recently learned that her child has been diagnosed with a life-threatening condition that will substantially affect her abilities in the future. So medyo ito yung mga traumatic or mga anxiety-provoking situation that are the structure, the id, ego, and superego cannot handle the views defense mechanism. For an hour, she talks to a social worker in detail about medical condition without showing any emotion. This is a form of what defense mechanism? Okay. It is not letter A because devaluation is somehow a person attributes themselves to an object or to a person as completely flawed or worthless. Kumbaga, there is some sort of self-pity among himself or herself. Hindi din siya substitution, as we previously discussed it, hindi siya substitution because there is no greater goal in substitute to a more realistic goal. Hindi din siya rationalization kasi rationalization, there is an unjust behavior. Wala namang unjust behavior dito. And you tend to justify your unjust behavior. For example, ng rationalization is yung mainit yung ulo mo or palagi mong pinapagalitan yung mga subordinate mo. Pinapagalitan mo sila, tapos tinanong ka ng colleague mo, bakit mo pinagalitan yung mga subordinate mo? Tapos sabi mo, traffic kasi kaninang morning. So, that is rationalization. So, your answer is letter C, intellectualization. Kasi yung intellectualization, you tend to stick with the logic, you tend to be objective, and you tend to isolate yourself in that objectivity in order not to recognize that emotional baggage, in order not to be emotional enough. Kasi dito, for an hour, ito yung highlight, for an hour, she talks to a social worker in detail about medical condition without showing any emotion. So, yung client mo na merong anak, she tend to intellectualize na dinidiscuss yung details ng medical condition without showing any emotion. That is intellectualization. Okay. Number 8. Question. When May's parents left for Manila to work as the eldest child, she took care of her siblings with firm authority and sense of responsibility. The pattern of power is, ang question dito is the pattern of power and authority. So, we have two choices, no? It's either patriarchal or matriarchal. So, the correct answer is matriarchal, obviously, because babae si May, kasi may pronoun na she. Patriarchal naman, the power and authority is vested on men. Pero pag sinabi natin patrilineal or matrilineal, it is not about power and authority, but it is all about relationship and kinship. Pag tinatanong dito ang relationship and kinship, then we could answer matrilineal. But if ang tinatanong dito is the pattern of marriage based on settlement, we have also patrilocal, wala dito, no? Patrilocal, matrilocal, and marami pang local yan, may avunculocal pa. Anyway, you will discuss this in your human behavior and sa social environment na subject. Okay. So the correct answer is matriarchal. Number 9. Which of the following is not a separate stage experience in the 5 stages of grief? Ang pinaka-common yan is yung ang stages of grief, may 5 yan, no? You have denial first, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and last yung acceptance. So, sa hindi nabanggit yan, walang hope, no? Walang hope sa stages of grief. So, again, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So, hindi kasali yung letter A. Number 10 question. A mother states that her 12-year-old son is now able to stay at home alone because he is aware of dangers, meets his basic needs, and problem solves when needed. This child has reached which stage of cognitive development? Ang question na ito is referring to the cognitive development by Jean Piaget. Okay. Your answer should be letter C. No? The child has reached the cognitive development of concrete operation stage. Sa concrete operation stage kasi, focus na siya doon sa operational thought. That means to say, the child is more logical and methodological in manipulating the symbols. And he is less egocentric at this time, meaning he can stand on its own and he is aware of others, he can problem solve. Okay? And hindi siya pwede letter A, sensory motor, kasi yung sensory motor from 0 to 2 years old. Ang focus niya is more on motor activity, movement, without use of symbol, and the child learn based from trial and error. Yun yung sensory motor. Yung sa pre-operational naman, or kasi yung letter D, pre-occupational yung nasa choices nyo, no? Dapat pre-operational siya. 2 to 7 years old. Ang focus niya naman is yung symbolic thought, which means that the child developed language, memory, imagination, pero medyo egocentric pa siya, meaning selfish, no? Gusto niya yung attention, nasa sa kanya. And yung yung formal operation niya naman is from adolescence to adulthood, or throughout this span of life. Dito naman yung abstract concept, the use of symbols, abstract concept. So the correct answer here is letter C, concrete operation. Number 11. An 11-year-old child would like to start helping around the house with chores. She approaches her mother many times but is told she cannot assist because she won't do it right. During several attempts to do things on her own, she is scolded. According to psychosocial development theory, she may experience doubts in her abilities due to crisis in which of the following stages. Ang question na ito, if tip lang, no, if may mga questions that indicates the age of that person that is subject to the question, then we can easily identify at what stage that the person belongs to the developmental stages. Nakadepende din siya sa theory na tinatanong. In this instance, psychosocial development by Erik Erikson. 11-year-old, kapag we base it on an 11-year-old na age, then we can identify it na letter A. But also, if we try to answer that based on the characteristic mismo ng industry versus inferiority, then we yield to the same answer in industry versus inferiority. Kasi, according sa mga developmental stages theories, like Freud, like Erik Erikson, Jean Piaget, and even Maslow, or and even Kohlberg, yung mga theories na yon, not all individuals has the same pace of growth. So, possible na 11-year-old siya, but previous pa yung stage of development, or possible, 11-year-old na siya, nandun pa siya sa role, identity versus role confusion na stage. Okay? May mga ganyan. But if we base it on characteristic, industry versus inferiority, andito na siya sa, kasi ang characteristic nito, the child develops a need to win approval by showing his or her competencies. If it is encouraged, then it leads to the characteristic of being industrious. But if it is criticized and discouraged, then it leads to feeling of doubt of one's ability. So that is the question. Basically, it answers this question, letter A. But bakit hindi letter B, letter C, letter D? Because ang letter B, initiative versus guilt, based sa age, hindi siya akma. At the same time, based sa characteristic, dito na characteristic ng initiative versus guilt na stage, initiating activities, building his interpersonal skills. If criticized, then it leads to the feeling of guilt that affects interaction to others and limit creativity. Kung sa letter C naman, autonomy versus shame, ang age naman is 18 months to 3 years. So, hindi siya akma doon sa age ng question. At the same time, ang characteristic niya, if it is encouraged, the child encouraged the milestone, or the effort of the child at this point of time. If it encouraged, then it leads to confidence. But if it is criticized, then it leads to overly dependent type of characteristic, lack of self-esteem, and doubt of one's ability. And sa generativity and stagnation naman, ang age na ito is dun yun sa adulthood. No, if we have this effort to contribute to the society or in the community in general to have a meaningful existence, then you develop this characteristic of being, no, or being able to contribute to the society, or generativity. But on the other hand, if it is discouraged, then it leads to stagnation. Yun yung 11. The correct answer is letter A. Number 12. Which of the following is not true? Which of the following is not true of life crisis? The correct answer is letter A. Why? Because life crisis, as we all know, has this precipitating factor. Hindi siya tawag nito, hindi siya one snap at a finger na magkakaroon ka na ng crisis, no? Possible siya na layered, multi-layered na crisis, small events of our life that leads to the state of active crisis na stage, no? So the correct answer is letter A. They must be precipitated, no? Hindi lang siya major life events but also minor, no? Mga minor crisis that leads to the, no? It leads to the state of active crisis later on. B, C, and D, in which they are addressed significantly impact subsequent functioning. They can produce healthier behavior if understood and overcome. They produce anxiety, tension, and disequilibrium. That is true characteristic of life crisis. Kasi if it is understood, then it leads to healthy behavior. Kasi ang tendency kapag ang tao ay in life crisis, yung old pattern of behavior in adapting to the new situation is not working, then it leads to a crisis. But ang ginagawa natin as a social worker, tinutulungan natin sila mag-identify ng resources within the community, resources within themselves, tinutulungan natin sila to identify what behaviors, no, na pwede nilang magamit or nag-workout before at saka hindi na nag-workout ngayon para mag-lead into new type of adaptation. That is our intervention in the crisis situation. Okay? Number 13. The correct answer in number 12 is letter A. 13. Robert has strong unconscious desire towards cathexis or physis. Pag sinasabi natin cathexis, it is an unhealthy degree of mental concentration, no? However, as this socially unacceptable, obviously, Robert developed an opposite response to the desire, exhibiting strong disgust of feces and defecating to the point of nausea, nahihilo siya, and vomiting. What defense mechanism is illustrated by Robert's behavior? As we discussed it previously, this is a form of reaction formation na defense mechanism. No? You are trying to evade that anxiety-provoking situation, which is his cathexis for feces, unacceptable for himself, by exaggerating directly the opposite tendency. Okay, so it is reaction formation. Projection, we already discussed it. Introjection, ito yung internalization of external behaviors or authority. Disassociation naman is a form of defense mechanism whereby a person loses track of time or themselves and their usual thought or process in a memory. So ito yung sa layman's term natin yung sabaw na sabaw, no? You disassociate yourself. This is common in disassociation defense mechanism is common on victims of sexual abuse. No? For example, child who is victim of sexual abuse during the time of rape, para siyang humiwalay sa kanyang sarili na nakikita niya yung sarili niya na habang nire-rape siya ng perpetrator. Kaya ng tendency niyan, nakakalimot siya ng mga detalye. So that is a form of defense mechanism kasi anxiety-provoking yung rape, no? Yung sexual assault na na-experience. So that is disassociation. And the correct answer is reaction formation. Okay, number 14. 14 question. Marjorie did not have a healthy relationship with her father as her father left her and her mother for another woman. As a result, in her adult life, Marjorie felt a sexual preference to older males. According to classical psychoanalysis, what defense mechanism is being employed by Marjorie? For this one, gagawin natin tong bonus kasi yung choices is wala sa choices. No? The correct answer should be fixation. Okay. Kasi Marjorie did not fulfill sa phallic stage yung love, no? Yung love ng kanyang father, specifically on the note that sa Electra complex na side. But if your answer is letter C, it is closer to correct answer. No? Gawin na lang natin ito na lang letter C is the best option we have. But the correct answer is fixation. Okay? Hindi siya pwedeng introjection kasi Introjection is the internalization of external ideas, behavior, or authority from your outside environment. I mean, from your environment. So, you copied the behavior of others. So, hindi naman ganun yung case ni Marjorie. And hindi din siya projection because a projection, by its definition, is taking our own unacceptable qualities of feelings and ascribing them to people. For example, if you hate, if you despise or you hate your colleague or your sister or somebody else, significant others, then i-reverse mo siya na instead of sinasabi mong hate mo sila, hindi siya acceptable sa sarili mo, then sasabihin mo lang na ayaw nila sa'yo. Yun yung projection. In displacement, hindi din siya pwedeng displacement kasi yung displacement is a form of defense mechanism where we are unacceptable response to their behavior from somebody who is bigger than us na hindi natin pwedeng sabihin sa kanila directly, dinidisplace natin sa medyo makaya natin. For example, if you get angry with your boss, hindi mo siya masabihan na ganito, direkta na galit ka. E pag uwi mo sa bahay, kasi hindi mo pwedeng sagutin si boss ng ganun, sinasagot mo lang yung kapatid mo, yung aso mo, or yun yung displacement. And the closest answer is Electra complex. Why? Because Electra complex, ito yung unfulfilled love. No? The girl's sense of competition with her mother for the affection of her father. Kasi hindi na fulfilled ito at the phallic stage, so kaya nagkakaroon ng fixation. Kaya ang preference ni Marjorie ngayon, yung older male. But the correct answer should be fixation, but the best option we have is Electra complex. So if your answer is Electra complex, that's the best option, then that's the correct answer for this instance, number 14. Okay, number 15. Oscar was orphaned at the age of 4. He strayed in the streets of Quiapo begging for alms together with some street children. After many years, he was kidnapped by an underground syndicate and was brought to Angeles City. He was trained in snatching like a pro. At the age of 16, Oscar has become a notorious snatcher all over Angeles and even involved in holdups. What theory explains the development of Oscar's wrongdoings? The correct answer is differential association theory by Edwin Sutherland. Okay, let's look at letter B muna. Social disorganization theory, hindi ito yung theory that explains Oscar's behavior because social disorganization theory, ang highlight or ang assumption niya is location matters. That means to say deviance is most likely committed in communities with weak social ties and absence of social control. Although close enough siya, but then again, letter A pa rin yung answer natin. Later explain natin. Letter C, social control theory. It is not the theory that explains this behavior of Oscar because social control theory by Travis Hirschy said that people will commit deviance if there is a weak social bond. That is, if Oscar has a weak attachment to the significant others, if Oscar has a weak bond with his commitment, if Oscar is not involved in any community, any activity that diverts his attention, and if Oscar has a weak belief, so hindi naman siya found doon sa ating situation, so it is not the answer. No? And hindi din siya conflict theory because it is not a matter of power, the bourgeois and the proletariat na conflict, no? So the correct answer is letter A, differential association theory, kasi yung differential association theory, yung premise niya, kung sino daw yung kasabay mo, kung sino yung kapareho mo ng situation, kapag na-train ka doon sa experience na yon, then you tend to become deviant. In this case, si Oscar naman was kidnapped in underground and was influenced by this underground syndicate. So the correct answer is differential association theory. Although correct naman sila, all of them are true in explaining deviance activity, but the closest theory that we attribute to the situation is letter A. So the correct answer is letter A. Number 16, religious groups and opposition viewed the war against drugs campaign of the president of this administration as inhumane and abusive in terms of authority. They want to convince that the president has misled the public in calling for a massive social change. What theory could explain such situation? Again, hindi siya pwedeng social control theory kasi the people did not commit deviant act kasi there is a weak social bond. Ang religious group and opposition, they have a strong bond. No? But then again, hindi din siya pwedeng functionalist theory kasi ang functionalist theory, as we all know, every system has its own function and every system has its own structure. For example, the government structure, the economic structure, the banking system, and etc. Every one of those structures has its own function to maintain equilibrium. Yun yung kapag one system or one structure nag-breakdown, it affects the other system, it affects the other structure, therefore nagkakaroon ng social change. Hindi din siya pwedeng socialist organization kasi hindi siya based doon sa locality or sa location. It is more on symbolic interactionism because the premise of symbolic interactionism, we create our own meaning, no? From the symbols, we create our own meaning from that symbols. Then religious group has its own meaning. I mean symbols and has its own meaning. Therefore, it affects how they view the present administration or how they, and they call for social change. And the correct answer here is symbolic interactionism, letter C. Next, number 7. Aling Becky was found guilty of falsification of documents after signing documents which she can't remember because of her old age. Mrs. Hivalinos falsified a lot of government transactions during her term as a mayor but was not found guilty even though there are concrete evidence that can put her in jail. What theory deviance could explain the comparison? Obviously, the correct answer is conflict theory. No? It's a matter of class. It's a matter of who is in power. So, ang assumption kasi ng conflict theory, if you belong in the lower class, then you tend to commit deviant. If you belong in the upper class, then hindi ka magkakaroon ng deviant act because you have the resources and power to cover up your mistakes or to cover up your deviant act. So the correct answer here is conflict theory. Okay. 18. If applied in social work, it adds in the understanding of various ways a client system may adapt to an ever-changing environment in order to cope, survive, compete for needed resources. Letter A is the correct answer, ecological perspective. Kasi no, ang ecological perspective naman, we use that in analyzing the individual in his environment. The individual is in a continuous transaction to adapt to his environment. So the correct answer is ecological perspective, letter A. Hindi siya pwedeng theory of equifinality because the concept of equifinality, para siyang, there are many ways to kill a dog. In other words, there are many ways, but then again, isa rin din yung patutunguhan. No? Ginagamit yung theory of equifinality in understanding different means to an end. Hindi din siya pwedeng general systems theory kasi ang general systems theory is more on doon sa concept ng boundary, more on siya sa concept ng tension, communication, feedback, and etc. Hindi din siya pwedeng game theory kasi yung game theory is basically explaining the economic aspect when it comes to decision making. Kapag nakikita nila, kasi ang assumption ng game theory, hindi magpo-proceed ang isang group into a decision kapag they find it is not beneficial for them. They find that the consequence is greater than their benefit. So, hindi pwede game theory. So, the correct answer is ecological perspectives. Number 19. Common theoretical approach to social work focuses on the interaction between individual and the various systems in the environment. Why is that social workers' focus must centralize on the individual and environment? A. It is because social worker must capacitate the client to become aware of his action. B. Because it is where social workers direct their efforts at change. C. It is because social workers must have hypothesize the situation of the client and his or her background. D. Because social worker must include in studying the client to answer his or her own problem. In this situation, in this question, mapapansin natin yung first sentence, nilay down ng question yung situation, no? Interaction between individual and various system. Then the second sentence is the main question. Why is that social worker focused must centralize on the individual and on the environment? Hahanapin natin yung answer that directly yung option that directly answers to that question that why we must focus our effort in individual and in the environment. Your answer should be letter B. That is the best option because it is where the social workers direct their efforts at change. And remember, social functioning is the focus of social work. If we refer social functioning, babalikan natin yung definition ng social functioning, it is the individual's effort, no? It is the individual interaction toward his environment. It is the individual coping and environmental demand. So, yun yun, individual coping and environmental demand. The focus here is the individual and his environment. Okay? So, the best option is letter B. Letter A, it is because social worker must capacitate the client. So, focus lang siya sa individual. Letter D, because social workers must include it in studying the client. Focus pa rin siya sa client. Letter C naman, because social worker must apotheosize the situation of the client and his or her background. Hindi nag-i-end doon sa pag-understand, no? Doon sa pag-understand doon sa kliyente ng kanyang situation. Ang social work practice hindi nag-i-end sa assessment lang, hanggang termination yan. Ibig sabihin, yung effort of change from assessment to termination, ang focus is individual and his environment. Kaya letter B yung best option natin. 20. Which of the following supports the veracity of systems theory as a useful theory in social work practice? Remember, I mean, in taking tests, advantage sa atin kung malawak yung ating vocabulary. For example, hindi natin alam yung veracity. No? Veracity simply means truthful or factually correct. No? So, which of these is correct when it comes to systems theory in analyzing social work practice? A. External forces does not always explain difficulties and problems of the people. Rather, it is always necessary to examine inner force. No, it is not. Kasi in systems theory, all of the systems, micro, meso, macro, exo, and even chrono system are involved in analyzing the situation. So, hindi siya letter A. Hindi din siya pwede letter C. Help social worker to understand and use system theory since structure of social system is described as a network of rules. Although tama siya, but the best answer is letter B. Okay? Letter D naman, tingnan natin. Social workers engaged in helping relationship with individuals, groups, etc. need to understand the elements of interpersonal communication processes. Interpersonal, let's look at this. Letter C focuses on network of roles. Letter D focuses on the communication process within the system. And letter C focus on inner forces. But letter B allows social workers to focus their attention on the person, situation, environment, interrelatedness. That is the best option because the question is referring, ang question kasi is in generic form. A, C, and D is in particular. So it should, kasi kung generic yung tanong, general yung sagot. Generic yung tanong, general din yung sagot. Specific yung tanong, particular yung ating answer. So, yun yung pinagkaiba nila. Okay? So, the best option is letter B. Number 21, the closed system does not interact with other systems, neither accepting inputs from them nor producing outputs to them. Itong question na ito is referring to the concept itself. The concept na tinutukoy dito is letter B. So, the correct answer is letter B, entropy, because if a system cannot produce input towards cannot produce input in itself or inputs towards other system nor produce outputs to them, then the system will die. Yun, entropy. Yung synergy naman, ito yung konsepto that the whole is greater than the sum of its part. Ibig sabihin, kahit pa different systems are working, pinagsama-sama mo yan, iba pa rin yung synergy or harmonization of different social systems. Yun yung synergy. Niche naman is whereby as a system can live on its own, no? May sarili siyang environment that can sustain on its own. Dependency, I think walang ganun na konsepto within the systems theory. Okay, so the correct answer is entropy. Number 22, simpleng tanong lang if you can still remember the concepts. It is a social process by which those ones in conflict can work together in common enterprises. As we all know, basic social processes, pag sinasabi kasi natin social process, this refers to the process of interaction within our society. And pinag-aaralan din natin yan, no? Kasi it affects the blending of culture, the blending of characteristics and traits within the society. In basic social process, we have three, no? Cooperation, conflict, and competition. From that basic social processes, we have derived social processes. If conflict arises, meron ding mga iba pang social process that takes place, no? Isa dito is yung accommodation, acculturation, amalgamation, and assimilation. For this one, the correct answer here is accommodation. No? Accommodation, by its simple definition, it is the process whereby competing and conflicting individuals, groups, or even culture adjust their relationships to each other to overcome difficulties. So that is the question, and it answers the question. No? The correct answer is letter A. Hindi siya pwedeng acculturation because acculturation is the process in which an individual adapts, acquires, and adjusts to a new cultural environment but retain its own unique identity. For example, if you are a Bisaya, tapos you have this Bisaya culture, ito yung upbringing ng family mo, tapos or upbringing ng kultura mo, tapos lumipat ka sa ibang bansa, and you try to adjust but you maintain yung pagiging Filipino or pagiging Bisaya mo. Yun. Acculturation. Amalgamation, on the other hand, it is the process of mixing, blending two or more groups, races, and organization into a new identity. Okay? Para siyang mixing of culture through marriage. Yun yung amalgamation. Okay? Creating a new culture. Okay? Assimilation, on the other hand, example ng amalgamation, for example, na isang ethnic group from Mindanao nakapag-asawa ng ethnic group from Visayas, magkaiba yung ethnic group and culture nila. Pero once nag-married sila, magkakaroon sila ng bagong kultura. Yun yung bagong kultura ng magiging anak nila, ng magiging family nila. Yun yung amalgamation. Assimilation, yung pang-apat na derived social process, refers to the process whereby minority groups loses its identity to adapt to the majority culture. It is a two-way process. Also, the majority adjusts and some of its identity lose around the process. So, marrying, assimilation, assimilate. Yun yung joke natin palagi sa field kapag some of our social workers, they assimilated the culture of our client, no? Yung hindi na disorganized and etc. So yun yung assimilation of the minority culture and the majority culture both adjust and they blend and losing its identity. Ang pinagkaiba ng acculturation, although nagbe-blend si minority group doon sa majority group, but that minority retain its own identity. Okay, yun. Anyway, nalalearn niyo pa yan later on sa ating review course. 23. What theory postulates and separate interacting system make up the structure of personality? So, saan dito ang may structure ng personality? The correct answer is letter B, psychoanalytic theory. No? May structure yan. The id, ego, and superego. Okay, number 24. According to Carl Jung, this is the public face or role of presence to others as someone different who really we are. The correct answer here is the self. No? Persona. Letter B. The correct answer here is letter B, persona. Persona, it is what we want to see, or it is our mask. No? Or yan yung one of the archetypes. Kasi may different archetypes si Carl Jung. We have persona, the self, the shadow, and the animus and anima. Kay Carl Jung naman, Carl Jung naman, as compared kay Freud, may three structures din. Although magkaiba sila ng pangalan. Kay Freud, the id, ego, and superego. Kay Carl Jung, we have the ego as the conscious mind, the personal unconscious, binubuo ng mga memories including these suppressed memories, and we have the collective unconscious. Yung collective unconscious na structure ni Carl Jung, ito yung mga traits na nakuha natin from our prehistoric times up until now na mga suppressed memories ng ating mga ninuno na napasa sa atin through our mind na preserve yan through collective unconscious. Okay. Yung shadow na tinutukoy ko, one of the archetypes, ito yung isa sa mga archetype na this is the sex and life instinct and repressed ideas that are unacceptable. So yun yung the shadow. Ang animus naman, it is the male image of female psyche or the the male, no? The male image of female psyche. And yung anima naman is the feminine image of the male psyche. So both represents our true selves. So sa lalaki, sabi ni Carl Jung, hindi siya purely lalaki but meron siyang feminine archetype. And sa babae, meron din siyang male side. Okay. 25, in this stage, interest in the genitals coming from the term with the oedipal conflict leading to identification with the same-sex parent. In this stage, ang phallic na ito, no? The correct answer here is letter C, the phallic. Meaning, sa phallic, the erogenous zone or the pleasure sa pleasure na parte kung saan tayo nakakaroon ng pleasure is around our genitals, sabi ni Freud. Usually, nag-exist siya around 4 to 5 years old. And ang kino-consider natin dito is ma-overcome yung Oedipus and Oedipal complex. No? Kapag hindi na na-resolve ito, it can lead later on in life, pwede tayong maging criminal. No? Pwede tayong mag-commit ng deviance act or magkaroon ng sexual dysfunction. Yung oral naman, around birth yan, 0 to 1 years old. 1 year old. So, kapag hindi daw na-solve, or for example, hindi tayo na alagaan, nagkaroon ng, for example, hindi nabigyan ng oras yung feeding time natin, nagkakaroon ng fixation. Yung mga example ng mga fixation dito is, paglaki natin later on in life, pwede tayong maging heavy smoker, tsaka overeater. Yan. Sa anal naman, anal stage, ito yung from 1 to 3 years old. Usually, kapag hindi na-solve yung toilet training natin dito kasi ang erogenous zone natin is yung anus natin, kapag hindi na-resolve yung toilet training, then it can lead to adult fixation na pwedeng maging orderlessness or missiness. And yung next stage after anal is yung phallic, which is na-discuss na natin. And yung pang-apat is yung latency. Yung latency naman, walang pleasure, walang erogenous zone na nakikita. It's because latency nga, no, nasusuppress or nare-repress yung ating sexual drive towards socializing others. Instead na magiging nagkakaroon ng pleasures around our anywhere from our body, nakakonvert yan into how we socialize with others kasi ito yung school age natin. No? Walang ma-develop na defense mechanism at this point in time. Then, pinaka-last na stage is yung genital stage. So, 12 years. So, from latency, na repress muna yung sexual drive natin or yung libido natin, then later on, sa genital stage, no, nagkakaroon ng reawakening. Dito naman, we must develop sexual feelings towards other for gratification. No, hindi tayo magkakaroon 12 years old sa ating teenage life ng problema kapag prior sa mga stages na yun, hindi tayo nagkaroon ng issues. Okay? Number 26, according to this theory, biological in belief that there are innate drives. So this is obviously psychosocial stages ni Freud, no? The innate drives, the libido and the death drive. No? 27. In this stage of development, the individual is starting to flex from acquiring new learning skills surrounding mastery of knowledge and intellectual skills. This is what we call industry versus inferiority stage. No? As we mentioned earlier, that the child develop a need to win approval from others through demonstrating competencies. This is what we call starting to flex itself, no? From acquiring new learnings. If ma-reinforce, then it can lead to characteristic of being industrious, and if it is discouraged, then leads to inferiority or doubting of oneself. #28 question, acculturation can be best described as the process by which, okay, the correct answer is letter A. No? Members of a culture group adopt the traits of the host society. And yung example natin kanina, for example, if you are Filipino and you migrate to Canada to work or to settle there, Yan. Nagkakaroon ng adaptation when it comes to their culture, when it comes to their language. But acculturation, pinagkaiba niya sa assimilation, di ba? Acculturation, you retain your own identity as Filipino, but you adjust to their culture, you adjust to their way of living. B, C, and D are considered amalgamation, assimilation, and assimilation, and even adaptation. I mean accommodation. So the correct answer here is letter A. 9. The quality of social interaction facilitates growth individual in the society, in the social environment. This is according kay Ferdinand Tonis, no? na Gemeinschaft at Gesellschaft. Yung Gemeinschaft, by its definition, this is the way of social interaction that is characterized by close, intimate, and personal way of communication or interaction. Yung Gesellschaft naman is yung superficial, no? Superficial, impersonal na way of communication. Kasi itong Gemeinschaft at Gesellschaft, it explains ano yung social interaction before and after. So it explains social change, no? From modernization perspective, from functionalist perspective also, before, ang way of interaction natin is close, personal, intimate. And ngayon, since we evolve around the time, nagkakaroon na ng superficial way or Gesellschaft, from traditional to universal. Because traditional before, ang kinikilala lang natin is yung from our community. But as of today, universal na yung ating way of interacting with others kasi napipilitan natin. For example, sa review, di ba? We are strangers but napipilitan kayong kilalanin yung mga persons involved in your review kasi may benefit para sa inyo yon. That is superficial. That is Gesellschaft na way of communication, interaction. So the correct answer here is letter B, no? Gemeinschaft to Gesellschaft. From traditional Gemeinschaft to traditional universal Gesellschaft. Mali yung letter C and letter D kasi yung letter C, universal Gemeinschaft pa rin, no? So, yun. Kasi ang way of interaction and communication natin as of today is based na doon sa value of Gesellschaft na hindi mo siya kakaibiganin if the way of we interact, the way we build relationship is based on utility na. That is the Gesellschaft value. So the correct answer is letter B. Last item for human behavior is the situational, no? The mother is worried that her child might have been abused after noticing her 3-year-old son playing with his pennies at night before going to bed. She has only seen this behavior thrice a week right before sleeping while in his bedroom. When she talked to her son, the child did not disclose any suspicious incidents. What advice will you give to a mother about her concern? That is basing on the mother's observation. Ito ang ginamit ko na frame of analysis para matulungan ako in determining the correct answer kasi medyo tricky ito na question. Is yung theory na nalaman natin based doon sa theory ni Freud na developmental stages. So 3-year-old, we would assume na andun na siya more or less doon sa phallic stage. Sa phallic stage na the child, yung piniplay niya yung genitals niya in order to gain pleasure. And according to Freud, that is normal. But also, it is normal, and at the same time, if the child performs it beyond, for example, andun na siya sa latency stage na suppress na supposed to be yung sexual drive ng bata na suppress na siya, na focus na siya sa social interaction, and that becomes inappropriate. So the correct answer here is letter A. Another frame of analysis ko is yung titingnan natin sa helping process kung saan na banda yung question. I mean, saan na ang situation sa question is saan na banda doon sa ating helping process. If makikita natin, if we try to analyze the questions, saan banda sa ating helping process, we can determine na andun pa siya sa information gathering or sa first step ng ating helping process. Therefore, letter B and letter C, we cannot create referral. Kasi nga, we did not completely understand the situation of the child and the suspicion of the mother. Hindi pa kompleto yung ating information. We are playing solely on our assumption based from our theoretical understanding of psychosexual stages of Freud. And letter D, we cannot persistently ask the mother to ask the child if someone touches his genitalia, again because this is normal based from our theoretical understanding. So ganun po mag-analyze. Kaya nga pinakamahirap na subject sa lahat is yung HBSE. Kasi combination siya ng ating theoretical framework